In 1972, publishers rejected what would become one of the most detailed maps of death ever recorded. They called it too dangerous for public consumption. The material came through Jane Roberts, who channeled an entity called Seth, not your typical spiritual guide, but a systematic teacher who provided precise, step-by-step descriptions of what consciousness experiences the moment physical death occurs. What made Seth's teachings so controversial? He contradicted everything mainstream religion and science claimed about death. No judgment, no heaven or hell as we imagine them, no tunnel of light leading to eternal rest. Instead, Seth described death as an active, conscious process where you remain fully aware, making specific choices that determine your immediate post-death experience. The academic world initially dismissed it, yet decades of near-death experience research has validated many of Seth's core claims. Over 20 volumes of transcribed sessions provide an unprecedented level of detail about consciousness continuation, the first 3 stages after death, and why some souls get stuck while others transition smoothly. You're about to discover exactly what Seth revealed happens in those crucial first moments after your heart stops beating. The moment Seth first described what actually happens when we die, it challenged everything I thought I knew about death, and what he revealed wasn't the dramatic, Hollywood-style departure we've been conditioned to expect, nor the religious narratives most of us grew up with. Instead, Seth painted a picture of death as perhaps the most natural transition we'll ever experience, more like waking up from a dream than falling into darkness. Here's what caught me completely off guard. Seth explained that consciousness doesn't suddenly snap off like a light switch at the moment of clinical death. Instead, it begins a gradual withdrawal from the physical body that can start days, sometimes even weeks, before what doctors would call the official moment of death. This explains so many phenomena that medical professionals witness but can't quite explain. Why dying patients often speak to deceased relatives who seem to be in the room, why some people experience sudden moments of crystal-clear awareness, even in advanced stages of illness, or why others seem to visit family members in dreams to say goodbye before their physical death is even announced. Seth described this process using the concept of what he called the silver cord, an energetic connection between consciousness and the physical body that gradually loosens as death approaches. Think of it like a balloon slowly being released from someone's hand. The balloon doesn't instantly disappear. It gradually rises and drifts away. During this withdrawal period, consciousness exists in a kind of dual state, sometimes fully present in the physical body, sometimes exploring what Seth called the probable realities of after-death existence. This is why dying people often report seeing deceased loved ones or describe beautiful landscapes that others in the room can't perceive. They're not hallucinating, they're actually beginning to experience the broader reality that exists beyond physical perception. Seth explained that consciousness is simply starting to tune into frequencies it couldn't access while fully anchored in physical matter. But here's the part that really fascinated me: the actual moment of final separation from the body. Seth described it as an immediate sense of tremendous relief and expansion. Imagine being cramped in a small, uncomfortable space for hours and then suddenly stepping into a vast, beautiful landscape. Physical pain vanishes instantly because consciousness is no longer receiving signals from nerve endings and damaged tissue. But what doesn't disappear is your sense of self, your memories, your personality. All of that remains completely intact. Many people Seth worked with who had near-death experiences confirmed this continuity of consciousness. They found themselves floating above their physical body, able to observe everything happening in the room with perfect clarity. They could hear conversations, see the medical team working, watch family members' reactions, often with even greater perceptual acuity than they had while alive. This isn't some mystical phenomenon. Seth explained it as consciousness finally experiencing perception without the limitations of physical sensory organs. Now, Here's something crucial that Seth emphasized repeatedly: the role of fear in determining how smooth this transition becomes. He observed that people who approach death with terror or desperate resistance often create what he called psychic turbulence around their transition. It's like trying to swim against a powerful current instead of allowing it to carry you. This resistance doesn't prevent the transition, but it can make it more chaotic and confusing. On the other hand, those who approach death with acceptance or even curiosity tend to experience what Seth described as an almost effortless shift from one state of being to another. This doesn't mean you have to be eager to die, but rather that releasing the grip of fear allows consciousness to move more naturally through the transition. Seth also revealed something that explains a lot about near-death experiences across different cultures and belief systems. He said that immediately after death, consciousness tends to create initial experiences that align with the person's existing belief structure. A devout Christian might initially encounter Jesus or angels, while someone from a Buddhist background might experience something more aligned with their understanding of bardos or intermediate states. An atheist or materialist might simply find themselves in a peaceful, neutral environment without religious imagery. This isn't because these belief systems determine ultimate reality, but because consciousness needs a familiar framework to begin processing this new state of existence. Seth compared it to how we might dream in the language we're most familiar with, or how we tend to interpret new experiences through the lens of what we already understand. What's remarkable is that Seth provided incredibly detailed maps of what he called the territories of consciousness that exist beyond physical death, information that was considered too explicit and potentially destabilizing for his published books. These suppressed teachings, along with practical techniques for preparing consciousness for this transition, are now available through our free Insights Academy newsletter, where you'll also receive the Kybalion ebook and access to other profound wisdom that simply can't be fully shared on platforms like YouTube due to content restrictions. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Seth's teaching was his description of what he called the 3-day adjustment period. He explained that after the initial separation from the physical body, consciousness goes through approximately 3 days of what he termed orientation, a period of gradually adapting to existence without physical limitations. During this time, the newly deceased often remain close to familiar people and places, which explains why so many cultures have developed 3-day wake traditions or waiting periods before burial. Seth said, "This isn't coincidence. These cultural practices evolved because sensitive individuals throughout history intuitively recognized that something significant was happening during this time frame. The consciousness of the deceased person is still very much present and aware, often trying to communicate or provide comfort to grieving loved ones. Many people report sensing the presence of someone who has recently died or receiving what feel like messages or signs during exactly this 3-day window. What happens after this adjustment period is even more extraordinary. Seth described how consciousness, now fully adapted to its new state, begins to encounter what he called the welcoming committee, and this is where his revelations about meeting deceased loved ones and spiritual guides become absolutely mind-bending. The question everyone asks when they lose someone they love is heartbreakingly simple: will I see them again? According to Seth, the answer is yes, but not in the way most people imagine it will happen. Seth described the reunion process as one of the most misunderstood aspects of what occurs after death. He explained that when consciousness first separates from the physical body, there's often a period of confusion or disorientation. This is where the reunion process becomes crucial, but it doesn't unfold like some Hollywood movie where everyone appears exactly as you remember them. Instead, Seth revealed something he called camouflage, a phenomenon where spirits present themselves in forms specifically designed to comfort and orient the newly deceased. Your grandmother might appear as she was when you were 8 years old and spent summers at her house, not as the frail woman she became in her final years. Your father might show up wearing that old fishing jacket he loved, even though he died in a hospital gown. These aren't deceptions. They're conscious choices made by evolved consciousnesses to ease what could otherwise be an overwhelming transition. This camouflage extends beyond just physical appearance. Seth explained that the entire initial environment after death is often constructed to feel familiar and safe. Someone who lived their whole life in a small town might find themselves in a place that feels remarkably similar to home, complete with the sounds and smells that brought them comfort in life. The key insight here is that these environments aren't permanent destinations. They're temporary orientation spaces designed by what Seth called our spirit guides. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. These guides aren't necessarily the people you'd expect. While they might be former loved ones, Seth revealed that our deepest spiritual connections often extend far beyond our most recent lifetime. The person helping you transition might be someone you shared multiple incarnations with. Perhaps they were your brother in this life, but your teacher in a previous one, and your student in another. These are what Seth termed soul families, groups of consciousnesses that choose to incarnate together repeatedly, playing different roles to facilitate each other's growth. The orientation process itself is unlike anything we experience in physical life. Seth described how these guides communicate through direct thought transmission rather than spoken words. Imagine having a conversation where every nuance of meaning, every emotional undertone, every complex concept is transmitted instantly and completely understood. There's no possibility for misunderstanding because you're receiving the pure thought behind the communication, not just symbols or sounds that approximate meaning. During this orientation, guides explain one of the most crucial aspects of the afterlife realm: the nature of thought, creation. In physical life, we think of something, and it remains largely internal. In the afterlife dimensions, Seth explained, thoughts become far more tangible and immediate. Think of a rose, and you might find yourself holding one. Remember a favorite song, and you might hear it playing around you. This isn't magic, it's simply how consciousness operates when it's not filtered through dense physical matter. This explains why so many near-death experiences report seeing religious figures or symbols from their belief systems. Seth clarified that these aren't necessarily encounters with Jesus, Buddha, or other religious figures as they actually exist. Instead, they're often guides taking forms that match the person's belief system to make the transition less jarring. A devout Christian might see Jesus, while a Buddhist might encounter a bodhisattva. The guide is the same. The form is adapted for maximum comfort and recognition. But Seth's teachings get more complex when he addressed what happens as this orientation process continues. Not everyone chooses to maintain the same relationships after death that they had in physical life. Growth and evolution continue beyond physical death, and sometimes souls move in different directions. The husband and wife who seemed inseparable in life might discover they have different paths to follow in their continued development. This doesn't diminish the love they shared, it simply reflects the reality that consciousness is always expanding and evolving. Seth also revealed that some people resist this reunion process entirely. Those who die with very fixed beliefs about what should happen after death might initially reject help from guides who don't match their expectations. Someone expecting to meet St. Peter at pearly gates might turn away from a guide appearing as their deceased aunt. In these cases, Seth explained, the guides patiently work to present themselves in forms that the newly deceased can accept, sometimes requiring multiple attempts over what we might consider extended periods. The reunion process serves a dual purpose: emotional comfort and practical education. While the newly deceased are being reunited with familiar consciousnesses, they're also being prepared for the choices that lie ahead. These aren't arbitrary decisions imposed by some cosmic authority. They're opportunities for the consciousness to decide how it wants to continue its existence and development. Some choose to remain in these afterlife dimensions for extended periods, working as guides themselves or engaging in forms of learning and creation impossible in physical reality. Others feel drawn to reincarnate relatively quickly, eager to continue their development through new physical experiences. Still, others explore entirely different forms of existence that Seth described as beyond our current ability to comprehend. The reunion process ultimately reveals that death isn't an ending or even a pause. It's a transition into a broader spectrum of conscious experience where the relationships that truly matter continue to evolve and deepen across dimensions of existence most of us can barely imagine. Now, what Seth revealed about the life review process will fundamentally change how you understand the meaning and purpose of every single experience you've ever had. This isn't the Hollywood version of standing before some cosmic judge getting a thumbs up or thumbs down on your earthly performance. What actually happens is far more profound and transformative than any religious doctrine has ever described. According to Seth, the life review begins when you've completed your reunion with guides and loved ones and you've fully adjusted to your expanded state of consciousness. But here's where it gets fascinating. You don't just remember your life like flipping through a photo album. You literally re-experience key moments, but with a level of awareness and understanding that was impossible while you were physically incarnated. Think about the most emotionally charged moment from your childhood, maybe when you felt deeply hurt or incredibly joyful. Now imagine experiencing that same moment, but simultaneously understanding the thoughts and feelings of every other person involved. Seth explained that during life review, you don't just relive events from your own perspective. You experience them from multiple viewpoints simultaneously, your own, those of everyone you interacted with, and from an expanded, objective awareness that reveals the intricate web of cause and effect surrounding each situation. This creates some absolutely mind-blowing revelations. That teacher who seemed harsh and unfair to you in 3rd grade, during life review, you experience her perspective, perhaps discovering she was going through a difficult divorce and was actually fighting to maintain her composure while teaching. You feel her genuine concern for your education beneath her strict exterior. That moment when you lashed out at your spouse during a stressful period, you experience the full emotional impact from their side, not as punishment, but as complete understanding. Seth emphasized that this process reveals the ripple effects of actions that seemed insignificant at the time. A smile you gave to a stranger on a particularly dark day might have prevented them from making a devastating decision. You witness how that small act of kindness rippled outward, affecting their family, their work, their entire life trajectory. Conversely, you also see how moments of cruelty or indifference created wounds that influenced someone's behavior for decades. One of the most crucial aspects Seth revealed is that this entire process is completely self-directed. There are no external judges, no cosmic courtroom, no divine authority figure tallying up your sins and virtues. You are both the reviewer and the reviewed. Your own value system, your level of spiritual development, and your capacity for self-honesty determine how deeply you examine each experience and what you take from it. This self-directed nature creates an interesting dynamic. People who lived with tremendous guilt and self-judgment often prolong and intensify their life review unnecessarily. They become stuck in cycles of self-recrimination, replaying painful moments over and over. Meanwhile, those who approach the process with self-compassion and a genuine desire to understand and grow move through it much more fluidly. Seth described witnessing souls who spent what we might consider years reviewing a single traumatic event, not because external forces demanded it, but because their own guilt and shame kept them locked in that experience. On the other hand, he observed others who had lived seemingly more challenging lives move through their review relatively quickly because they maintained perspective and focused on learning rather than self-punishment. The life review also reveals the deeper purposes and lessons that were intended for that particular incarnation. Remember, according to Seth, we don't just randomly stumble into physical existence. We choose our lives with specific objectives in mind, certain experiences we want to have, particular qualities we want to develop, specific relationships we want to explore. During the review, these original intentions become crystal clear. You might discover that the difficult relationship with your parent wasn't just bad luck or poor family dynamics, but was actually chosen by both souls to work through specific patterns of control and independence. That career setback that felt devastating at the time might be revealed as perfectly timed to redirect you toward your true purpose. The chronic illness that seemed like punishment might be understood as a chosen experience to develop patience, compassion, or spiritual strength. This is where Seth's insights become particularly profound regarding major life challenges and traumas. From the expanded perspective of the life review, even the most painful experiences often reveal their role in soul development. This doesn't minimize the very real suffering involved, but it provides a framework for understanding why souls would choose such difficult paths. A person who experienced abuse might discover during life review that they chose this experience to develop incredible strength and compassion, and that their healing journey inspired dozens of others to overcome similar trauma. Someone who lived with addiction might see how their struggle and recovery became a beacon of hope for family members and friends facing similar battles. The timing of the life review varies dramatically depending on the complexity of the life lived and the individual's readiness to process their experiences. Seth explained that some souls move through this process in what we might consider days, while others take decades or even centuries. Time operates completely differently in these realms, so these durations aren't experienced as tedious waiting periods, but as necessary integration phases. What's particularly interesting is how this process prepares consciousness for the next phase of existence. The life review isn't just about understanding what happened, it's about integrating those experiences into your expanding awareness and using that wisdom to make decisions about your continued evolution. Some souls discover they've accomplished their major objectives and feel ready to move into entirely different forms of existence beyond physical incarnation. Others realize they have unfinished business or want to explore certain themes more deeply, leading them to plan another physical lifetime. Still, others choose to remain in non-physical realms for extended periods, perhaps serving as guides for incarnated souls or exploring other dimensions of reality. Seth revealed that the completion of life review marks a crucial transition point. You've fully integrated the experiences and lessons of your most recent incarnation. You understand how it fits into your larger spiritual evolution, and you're ready to consciously choose what comes next. This isn't a decision made for you by higher authorities, it's your own conscious choice based on complete self-knowledge and unlimited possibilities. The implications of understanding this process, while you're still physically incarnated, are staggering. Knowing that you'll eventually experience every interaction from all perspectives involved changes how you treat others. Understanding that small acts of kindness create massive ripple effects transforms how you move through your daily life. Recognizing that your challenges serve deeper purposes can fundamentally shift how you relate to difficulties. This is the real power of Seth's revelations about the life review. They don't just describe what happens after death, they provide a framework for living more consciously, compassionately, and purposefully right now. Now here's where Seth's teachings get absolutely fascinating. He didn't just describe death as some vague transition into the light. Instead, he mapped out 3 distinct territories that consciousness encounters after leaving physical reality, each serving specific purposes in our ongoing development as souls. But before we dive into these territories, you need to understand something crucial. Seth emphasized these aren't physical places you travel to in some cosmic geography. They're states of consciousness that appear as environments to those experiencing them. Think of it like this. When you're dreaming, your bedroom doesn't actually transform into the landscapes you experience, but to your dreaming consciousness, Those dream environments are completely real and interactive. The first territory Seth described is what he called the immediate post-death realm. This is where consciousness first lands after leaving the physical body, and it's deliberately designed to ease the transition. What makes this realm so interesting is how closely it resembles earthly reality, but with one game-changing difference: everything operates according to thought rather than physical laws. Seth explained that newly deceased individuals almost always create familiar surroundings in this realm. You might find yourself in a house that looks remarkably similar to your childhood home, or walking through a landscape from your most cherished memories. This isn't some cosmic accident. Your consciousness is literally creating these environments as a comfort mechanism while you adjust to your new state of being. But here's where it gets really intriguing. In this realm, if you think about wanting a garden appears. If you miss your grandmother's kitchen, you can manifest it instantly. Seth described cases where people spent what felt like months or even years in recreated versions of their earthly lives, complete with familiar routines, until they gradually realized they had far more creative power than they'd ever experienced in physical reality. Time operates completely differently here too. Seth explained that past, present, and future become fluid, allowing for experiences that would be impossible in linear time. You might have a conversation with someone who died decades before you, then immediately interact with a loved one who's still alive on Earth, experiencing them as they truly are at the soul level, not limited by their current physical incarnation. The second territory is what Seth called the development and learning realm, and this is where things get really expansive. Once consciousness adjusts to non-physical existence, it typically moves into this realm focused on continued growth and education. Seth described vast centers of learning, not like earthly universities, but more like collaborative spaces where beings with similar interests and development levels gather to explore reality itself. In these learning centers, you might study the fundamental nature of consciousness, explore your creative abilities without any physical limitations, or work with groups investigating how thoughts become reality. Seth mentioned that some beings become fascinated with understanding how different probable realities branch off from single decisions, while others focus on mastering the art of creating entire universes through pure intention. What's particularly compelling is Seth's explanation of how beings in this realm can participate in the lives of those still incarnated. They serve as guides, sources of inspiration, or protective influences. You know those moments when you suddenly get a brilliant solution to a problem, or feel an inexplicable urge to take a different route that later saves you from an accident? Seth suggested these often come from loved ones or guides operating from this development realm, able to perceive probable futures and gently influence events. The third territory Seth mapped is the advanced planning realm, where consciousness prepares for its next phase of development. This might involve reincarnation, or it might involve choosing entirely different paths of existence. Seth's description of how souls select their next incarnation is incredibly detailed and, frankly, pretty mind-blowing. According to Seth, choosing your next life isn't like picking items from a cosmic menu. Instead, consciousness carefully evaluates what experiences will provide optimal learning opportunities. You examine potential parents not just for their genetics, but for the psychological and spiritual dynamics they'll create. You consider life circumstances, cultural contexts, even specific challenges that will push your development in desired directions. But here's what really blew my mind when I first encountered this material. Seth explained that multiple probable selves exist simultaneously. Before making final choices about incarnation, consciousness can actually experience different versions of potential lives. You might explore what it would be like to be born into a wealthy family versus a struggling one, or experience the probable outcomes of choosing artistic pursuits versus scientific ones. Some advanced beings in this realm choose not to reincarnate at all. Instead, they become guides and teachers for others, or explore forms of existence that go far beyond physical reality. Seth described beings who become involved in creating and maintaining entire systems of reality, or who specialize in assisting other souls through their development processes. What makes Seth's mapping particularly credible to me is his emphasis that movement between these territories isn't rigid or linear. It's based on consciousness development and personal interests rather than some predetermined progression. A being might spend extensive time in the learning realm, briefly visit the planning realm to check on incarnated loved ones, then return to development work that fascinates them. Seth also explained that some consciousness chooses to maintain awareness across multiple territories simultaneously. These are typically more advanced beings who can function as bridges between different levels of existence, helping others navigate their development while continuing their own growth. The implications of this mapping are staggering when you really think about it. It suggests that death isn't an ending or even a simple transition, but rather a graduation into far more expansive forms of existence where consciousness can explore its true creative potential without physical limitations. Here's something that completely revolutionized my understanding of death and what comes after, and it's going to challenge everything you've been taught about reincarnation, whether you grew up with Eastern philosophy or Western religion. Seth dropped a bombshell that most spiritual teachers won't tell you. Reincarnation isn't some cosmic conveyor belt that automatically cycles souls back to Earth. It's not a mandatory sentence you have to serve, and it's definitely not some karmic debt collection system. It's a choice, a deliberate, conscious decision made by awareness itself. Think about that for a moment. Every major religious tradition treats reincarnation as either completely false or as an inescapable wheel of suffering. But Seth revealed something far more empowering. You choose whether to come back, when to come back, and what kind of life experience will serve your consciousness best. Now, this choice isn't made lightly or randomly. Seth explained that consciousness operates according to what he called value fulfillment, an inherent drive toward creative expression and development that's built into the very fabric of awareness itself. Imagine consciousness as an artist who's passionate about exploring every possible medium, every technique, every way of creating. Physical incarnation is just one incredibly rich medium for that creative expression. When consciousness evaluates whether to reincarnate, it's essentially asking, what do I need to learn or express that physical reality can provide better than any other realm? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes it's absolutely not. Seth identified several key factors that influence this decision. First, there's what we might call unfinished emotional business with other souls. But this isn't about punishment or working off bad karma. It's about completing creative collaborations that got interrupted. Think of it like musicians who started an incredible jam session but had to stop before they could fully explore where the music was taking them. Then there's the pure fascination factor. Some consciousnesses become absolutely captivated by the unique learning opportunities that physical existence provides. The intensity of emotions, the challenge of working within time and space limitations, the incredible complexity of human relationships. For many souls, Earth is like the ultimate graduate school for consciousness development. Here's where it gets really interesting. Seth talked about what he called soul contracts, but not in the way most New Age teachers present them. These aren't rigid agreements carved in cosmic stone. They're more like creative partnerships where consciousnesses agree to play specific roles in each other's development. One soul might say, "I'll be your challenging parent this time, so you can learn about personal boundaries," while another offers, "I'll be your business partner who betrays you so you can discover your own inner strength." But here's the crucial part. These agreements can be modified, cancelled, or completely rewritten based on how circumstances unfold. Free will always trumps any pre-birth planning. Seth revealed that some souls become so fascinated with physical reality that they choose multiple consecutive incarnations, sometimes barely pausing between lives. These are often the people who seem to have an insatiable appetite for life experience. They want to be the warrior, the artist, the mother, the hermit, the leader, the servant. They're like method actors who want to fully inhabit every possible human role. On the flip side, other consciousnesses extract everything they need from just a few physical incarnations and then move on to entirely different developmental paths. They might spend centuries exploring non-physical realms or become guides and teachers for souls still incarnating, or merge with larger consciousness units for experiences we can't even imagine from our physical perspective. The advanced souls who do choose difficult incarnations aren't being punished. They're often the spiritual equivalent of extreme athletes. They deliberately choose challenging circumstances because intensity accelerates development. That person born into poverty who becomes a teacher, that child with disabilities who inspires others. Often these are highly advanced consciousnesses who chose these experiences specifically for the rapid growth they provide. Now here's where Seth's teachings get mind-bending. He talked about probable reincarnations. Consciousness doesn't just live one linear life at a time. It can simultaneously experience multiple potential lifetimes, exploring different choices and outcomes. So while one aspect of your consciousness is living this current life, another aspect might be experiencing the life you would have had if you'd made different choices at key decision points. Seth also described how souls often incarnate in groups, taking turns, playing different roles across multiple lifetimes. The person who's your parent in this life might have been your child in a previous incarnation, or your spouse, or your best friend. These consciousness clusters work together across time, fully exploring every possible relationship dynamic. It's like a cosmic theater troupe where everyone gets to play every role eventually. For souls who choose not to reincarnate, the alternatives are fascinating. Some become specialized guides and teachers working with incarnated beings from the non-physical realm. Others explore dimensions of reality that don't involve physical matter at all, realms of pure creativity, mathematics, music, or concepts we don't even have words for. Some merge with larger consciousness units, becoming part of collective entities that manage entire systems of reality. The timing of reincarnation decisions varies enormously. Some consciousnesses choose to return almost immediately, sometimes within days or weeks of death. Others take centuries or even millennia to develop in non-physical realms before choosing another incarnation. There's no cosmic clock ticking, no deadline to meet. Each consciousness moves at its own perfect pace. What makes this information so powerful is that it puts you back in control of your spiritual development. You're not trapped in some endless cycle of suffering. You're not being punished for past mistakes. You're a creative consciousness choosing experiences that serve your highest development and expression. The implications are staggering when you really think about it. Every person you meet might be a soul who specifically chose to be here, right now, playing their particular role in the grand creative project of consciousness evolution, including you. Can the dead actually communicate with us? According to Seth, the answer is an emphatic yes, but not in the Hollywood movie way most people imagine. The reality of after-death communication is far more nuanced, beautiful, and scientifically fascinating than popular culture suggests. Seth explained that consciousness doesn't simply vanish at physical death like a candle being blown out. Instead, it transitions into different vibrational frequencies that normally operate outside our waking awareness. Think of it like radio waves. Just because you can't hear them without a receiver doesn't mean they're not constantly flowing through the air around you. The deceased exist in these higher frequency ranges, and communication happens when conditions align to bridge that gap. The most profound insight Seth shared about this communication is that love creates what he called energetic tethers, invisible connections that transcend dimensional boundaries. When someone dies who shared deep emotional bonds with the living, those connections don't simply disappear. They become pathways for ongoing interaction, though the nature of that interaction changes dramatically from our physical world conversations. Dream visitations represent the most common and natural form of after-death communication, and Seth explained exactly why this happens. During sleep, our conscious mind stops filtering and controlling our experience. The analytical brain that normally dismisses impossible perceptions goes offline, allowing our awareness to naturally attune to these higher frequencies. In dreams, we're already operating outside the constraints of physical reality, making us naturally receptive to contact from non-physical consciousness. But Seth was very specific about distinguishing authentic dream communications from ordinary dreams or wishful thinking. Genuine visits from the deceased have distinct characteristics. They feel more vivid and emotionally charged than regular dreams. The deceased person often appears healthy and peaceful, regardless of how they died, and they frequently convey specific information or comfort that the dreamer couldn't have generated from their own subconscious mind. Beyond dreams, Seth described several other communication methods. Synchronicities and meaningful coincidences often carry messages from deceased loved ones, finding their favorite song, playing at exactly the moment you're thinking of them, or discovering objects in impossible places. These aren't random events, but conscious attempts to get your attention using the limited tools available for cross-dimensional interaction. Direct thought transmission occurs with naturally sensitive individuals. Some people are born with what Seth called thinner veils. Their consciousness naturally operates across multiple frequency ranges. These individuals often report sudden knowing, unexpected insights, or hearing familiar voices during quiet moments. The key distinguishing factor is that authentic communication feels like receiving information rather than generating it from your own mind. Electronic phenomena fascinated Seth because modern technology creates new opportunities for after-death communication. Deceased consciousness can influence electromagnetic fields, causing phones to ring with no caller, radios to change stations, or lights to flicker in meaningful patterns. Seth explained, this happens because consciousness itself is electromagnetic in nature, making technology a natural interface point between dimensions. The timing of these communications follows specific patterns that Seth mapped extensively. The deceased often reach out during crisis moments, major life transitions, or anniversaries of significant events. They're particularly drawn to communicate when the living person is most receptive during meditation, prayer, or moments of quiet reflection. Seth described this as communication windows, when the veil between dimensions naturally thins. One of Seth's most important teachings involved what he called energy signature recognition, learning to identify authentic communication from specific individuals versus general psychic impressions or your own wishful thinking. Each consciousness has a unique energetic fingerprint, like a spiritual DNA. With practice, you can learn to recognize the specific feeling tone of different deceased loved ones, distinguishing between genuine contact and psychological projection. Seth had fascinating insights about why some deceased individuals communicate frequently while others seem completely silent. Several factors influence this: their level of spiritual development, how attached they remain to physical reality, and their respect for the living person's growth process. Some advanced beings deliberately limit contact because they understand that excessive communication can prevent the living from processing grief and moving forward with their own development. This connects to one of Seth's most crucial warnings: excessive grief, guilt, or desperate clinging by the living can actually impede healthy communication and sometimes trap deceased consciousness in what he called lower vibrational states. When someone dies and their loved ones refuse to let go, it can create energetic anchors that prevent the deceased from fully transitioning to higher realms. Seth emphasized that healthy communication requires emotional balance from both sides. The role of mediums and psychics in facilitating communication presented both opportunities and dangers in Seth's framework. While genuine mediums can serve as bridges between dimensions, Seth warned that the medium's own beliefs, expectations, and psychological needs often color or distort the messages received. He suggested that the clearest communication occurs through direct personal connection rather than third-party interpretation. Advanced beings who have progressed beyond the immediate post-death territories Seth mapped in earlier sections can still choose to communicate, but they typically do so through subtler means. Rather than direct contact, they offer inspiration, creative insights, or gentle guidance that feels like your own intuition. Seth explained that these advanced consciousnesses understand that obvious supernatural intervention would interfere with the living person's natural development process. For those seeking communication with deceased loved ones, Seth offered practical guidance that goes far beyond generic advice. Maintain emotional equilibrium. Desperation and excessive grief actually block the very connections you're trying to establish. Develop what he called receptive awareness through regular periods of quiet contemplation, not necessarily formal meditation, but simply creating space for subtle perceptions to emerge. The most powerful tool Seth recommended was keeping a communication journal, recording dreams, synchronicities, and unusual experiences without immediately analyzing or dismissing them. Patterns emerge over time that reveal authentic contact attempts you might otherwise miss. The ultimate message Seth conveyed about after-death communication is both comforting and empowering. Death doesn't end relationships, it transforms them. Learning to recognize and nurture these transformed connections enriches both your current life and your understanding of consciousness itself. The love that binds us to others truly is stronger than death. It just requires new eyes to see and new ears to hear. Here's what makes Seth's teachings so revolutionary. They fundamentally shatter the false choice we've been given between cold materialism and blind faith. For centuries, we've been told we must either accept that consciousness ends at death with no evidence beyond the physical, or believe in religious doctrines that often contradict our direct experience and rational understanding. Seth offers something entirely different, a framework that honors both our spiritual intuitions and our need for logical coherence. Think about the profound implications of what we've explored. If Seth's detailed descriptions are accurate, and the consistency and specificity of his information across decades suggest they are, then death isn't the terrifying unknown we've been conditioned to fear. It's literally a graduation ceremony. You're not ending, you're expanding into greater awareness, enhanced creative abilities, and deeper understanding of your true nature. This isn't wishful thinking or religious comfort food, it's a detailed map of consciousness that explains phenomena materialist science can't touch. The practical impact of truly understanding this cannot be overstated. Most human suffering stems from the fear of death, not just the event itself, but the underlying terror of meaninglessness, separation, and annihilation that colors every major life decision. When you know with certainty that consciousness continues, that your relationships persist beyond physical form, and that your growth and learning are eternal, everything changes. The anxiety that drives people to accumulate wealth they can't take with them, to avoid risks that could lead to authentic fulfillment, to remain in situations that diminish their spirit, all of this begins to dissolve. Consider how Seth's insights about the life review process should transform your daily interactions. Knowing that you'll experience every encounter from all perspectives involved, feeling exactly what others felt as a result of your words and actions, this isn't about judgment or punishment, it's about complete understanding. When you truly grasp this, manipulation becomes impossible, casual cruelty becomes unthinkable. The Golden Rule stops being a moral platitude and becomes a recognition of literal truth. What you do unto others, you will experience as if done unto yourself. This knowledge also revolutionizes how we understand belief systems. Seth consistently emphasized that our beliefs don't just influence our physical experience, They actively shape our post-death reality. The hellish experiences some report during near-death episodes aren't divine punishments, they're manifestations of guilt, fear, and limiting beliefs about unworthiness. Understanding this gives us tremendous power while we're still physically focused. We can consciously examine and transform beliefs that would otherwise create unnecessary suffering in expanded states of consciousness. The implications extend to how we view life's challenges. When you understand that difficult experiences are often soul-level choices made for specific learning purposes, victimhood becomes impossible to maintain. This doesn't mean accepting abuse or avoiding necessary action, quite the opposite. It means recognizing that your essential self chose this particular set of circumstances because they offered optimal opportunities for desired growth. Your job isn't to remain trapped by circumstances, but to extract the intended learning and move forward with greater wisdom and compassion. Perhaps most liberating is Seth's revelation that we are eternal beings temporarily focused in physical reality, not physical beings desperately hoping for spiritual survival. This completely inverts the traditional relationship between life and death. Your physical experience becomes incredibly precious precisely because it's temporary and unique, while simultaneously losing the desperate edge that comes from believing it's all you have. You can take meaningful risks, pursue authentic paths, and express your true nature without the paralyzing fear that mistakes will doom you to eternal punishment or oblivion. This understanding transforms grief in profound ways. When my own loved ones have died, Seth's teachings provided a framework for maintaining genuine connection while releasing the attachment that can become spiritually destructive for both the living and the deceased. Death becomes a transition rather than a severing. You can honor the relationship's continuation while allowing both yourself and the departed to grow beyond the specific roles you played together in physical reality. The knowledge that consciousness continues also inspires remarkable courage in pursuing your authentic life path. Knowing that growth and learning extend beyond physical death means that risks taken in service of genuine self-expression and spiritual development are never truly wasted, even if they don't produce conventional success. The courage to be authentically yourself becomes not just personally fulfilling, but cosmically significant. Seth's teachings create a fascinating paradox. Your current life becomes simultaneously more important and less pressured than conventional wisdom suggests. More important because you understand that how you develop your consciousness, express love, and contribute to the collective human experience matters on an eternal scale. Less pressured because you know this particular lifetime is one movement in a much larger symphony of existence. The creative nature of consciousness in post-death realms reveals why developing artistic, intuitive, and imaginative abilities while physically incarnated is so crucial. These aren't mere entertainment or luxury, they're fundamental aspects of consciousness that become primary tools for navigation and creation in expanded reality. Every time you engage your creativity, develop your intuition, or expand your capacity for love and understanding, you're literally preparing for expanded existence. This knowledge creates profound responsibility alongside tremendous comfort. Understanding that consciousness continues and develops means that how we live, love, and grow matters on a scale we can barely comprehend. Every choice to express compassion rather than judgment, creativity rather than conformity, authentic connection rather than superficial interaction contributes to the evolution of consciousness itself. Yet this responsibility comes with the ultimate comfort. Death is not an ending, but a doorway to expanded existence, greater understanding, and continued growth in ways we can only begin to imagine from our current perspective. If this exploration of Seth's revolutionary insights about consciousness and death has opened new possibilities for understanding your own eternal nature, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."